In this video, we'll be taking a look at Bootstrap World Lesson 1. This is our first lesson in Unit 4, which is our coding unit. At this point, you should have this Lesson 1 packet in front of you, and if you have not copied down these definitions yet, I would suggest that you pause the video now and copy them down. Once you have the definitions written down, let's do a quick recap. So the coordinate plane is basically a graph. It's made up of your x-axis and your y-axis. X-axis is horizontal, y-axis is vertical. Each specific location on the graph is represented by a set of coordinates in the form x, comma, y. Please be aware that when you write down coordinates, you need parentheses, and you need to make sure that your x value goes in the first position and the y value goes in the second position. To calculate a midpoint, we're actually going to just be finding averages of the x's and averages of the y's. So let's take a look at the first example for midpoint. It says find the midpoint between the points 0, 100, and 60, 300. The first thing I want to do is focus on my x values, my 0 and my 60. And I want to calculate the average of those two numbers. To calculate the average of two numbers, we add the numbers together and divide by 2. 0 plus 60 is 60, divided by 2 is 30. That 30 is going to be the x coordinate of my midpoint. But then I need to take a look at my y values, 100 and 300. And I need to calculate the average of those two numbers. The way I calculate an average is I add the two numbers together and divide by 2. 100 plus 300 is 400, divided by 2 is 200. That 200 represents the y value of my coordinate. So the midpoint, for my answer here to this first example, my midpoint is the location 30, 200. Make sure that you are using a set of parentheses for those coordinates. If you feel confident that you can move on and do the second example yourself, pause the video now, try it on your own. You will likely want a calculator in front of you of some sort. I'll give you the answer after you try it on your own. So now that you've had a minute to attempt this example on your own, I hope you found that the average of the x numbers, 150 and 300, is 225, and the average of the y coordinates, 25 and 175, is 100. That means that our midpoint is the point 225, 100. That's our final answer there. Midpoint is all about finding averages. All right, the last definition here is the origin. The origin is the specific location where the x-axis and the y-axis intersect. The coordinates are going to be 0, 0. So let's move on to talk about our video game characters. This is a very basic video game that exists that has 3 characters in it. Their names are Ninja Cat. No, I did not name him. Ninja Cat, Dog, and Ruby. Each of these 3 characters represents a general type of character. Ninja Cat represents the player. This is the character that you actually are controlling with the arrow keys on your keyboard. So the player is the character you control. The dog represents the danger. He represents the character the player tries to avoid. And the ruby represents the target. Think of a target as the goal. It's the thing that you're trying to collect. Specifically, it's the thing that the player tries to collect or catch. So those are the 3 characters in our video game. What I want to show you now is the actual video game that uses these 3 characters. On the next page in your packet, you're going to be writing down the actual things that you see in the video game, and we're going to talk about what's changing about each of those things. So let me open up the video game, and I am going to demonstrate how this game works by playing it for you. You should be paying attention to what's in the game and how are those things in the game changing. Okay, remember, I'm controlling the cat. I am using the arrow keys to jump, to try and kill the dog, which is the danger, and also I'm trying to collect the rubies. Okay, so I can move to the left and to the right, and I can press the up arrow, which allows me to jump. Pay attention to what's on your screen. What's changing? What's there that's not changing, but also what's moving, what's changing, and we'll take a look at that on the next page in the packet. So I'm moving left, I'm moving right, I'm controlling Ninja Cat. I want to kill the danger, and I want to collect the target. I want to collect the rubies. So I just got game over. I collided with the dog, so I have a game over. I can go back and play this again, but I think you guys probably get the gist. So let's go back to our note packet and take a look at page 2. Let's go ahead and fill in all of the things in the game. Hopefully you noticed that our 3 characters are there, the cat, the dog, and the ruby. But you hopefully also noticed that there were clouds. There's a background. And the thing that students often forget about is the fact that there's a score in the upper right-hand corner. So one of the things in the game is the scoreboard. So what changes about it? I'm going to start with the background because hopefully you noticed that nothing was changing with the background. The other 4 things in the game, the cat, the dog, the ruby, and the clouds, were all changing position. So we have to be a little bit more specific here because the position could be changing in the X direction only, that would be left and right, could be changing only in the Y direction, that would only be up or down, or the position could be changing in all directions, up, down, left, and right. That would be in the X and the Y direction. So hopefully you noticed that the clouds were only moving to the left. So the clouds only moved in the X direction. Same thing with the ruby and the dog. The ruby and the dog were only moving to the left. They only had movement in the X direction. Whereas the cat not only moved in the X direction, left and right, when I hit the left and right arrows, but he also moved up when I hit the up arrow, and then of course gravity brings him back down to the ground, and that is considered movement in the Y direction. So these are the things in the game, and this is how they work. This is what's changing about them. This is the background information that you need to know to be able to create a video game. Let's take a look at the bottom of page 2, where we're going to talk about what actually happens to the cat's coordinates when he moves right, left, up, or down. So specifically, we want to take a look at how is the X coordinate changing and how is the Y coordinate changing when he moves in each of these directions. So when the cat moves right, we're going to find that the X value increases and the Y stays the same. So movement to the right means the X increases, so we're adding 5 units to the right or 17 units to the right, but the Y stays the same. Movement to the left is going to indicate that the X will be decreasing and the Y stays the same. There's no movement in the Y direction when the cat moves right or left. However, when the cat moves up and down, this time it's a little bit different because the X is going to stay the same, but the Y is what changes. Up means the Y increases, down means the Y decreases. So this is how we're going to basically be able to teach the computer how to move our characters. Let's take a look at page 3. On page 3 we see a screenshot of the video game where in each corner we see coordinates that represent the bottom left, the bottom right, the top left, and the top right of our screen. Go ahead and in questions 1 through 4, go ahead and write down the coordinates for each of those 4 corners. You can pause the video now if you need to. After you've filled in questions 1 through 4 on this page, let's take a look at questions 5 through 8. 5 through 8 ask us to write down the midpoints of the left side of the screen, the right side of the screen, the top of the screen, and the bottom of the screen. So let's start with question 5, the midpoint of the left side of the screen. I know that the midpoint on the left side of the screen is going to be the average of the X's and the average of the Y's. So the average of 0 and 0 is 0, and the average of 0 and 480 is 240. So those are the coordinates of the midpoint on the left side of the screen. How about the midpoint on the right side of the screen? I know that the coordinates of the midpoint will be the average of the x's and the average of the y's. So the average of 640 and 640 is 640, and the average of 0 and 480 is 240. So those are the coordinates of the midpoint of the right side of the screen. Let's take a look at the midpoint of the top of the screen. The coordinates of the midpoint up at the top are going to be the average of the x coordinates and the average of the y coordinates. The average of 0 and 640 is 320, and the average of 480 and 480 is 480. So those are our coordinates up there. The coordinates down for the midpoint at the bottom of the screen are going to be the average of the x's and the average of the y's. The average of 0 and 640 is 320. The average of 0 and 0 is 0. So those are the coordinates for our 4 midpoints. Go ahead and fill those in questions 5 through 8 below. Once you have 5 through 8 filled in, let's take a look at 9 through 11. Numbers 9 through 11 ask us for the coordinates of the player, the danger, and the target. So one thing that's important to recognize here is we can approximate the coordinates. We don't know exactly what location each of these characters are at because there's no grid here. We kind of have to estimate and approximate. So the first thing I'm going to do to figure out the coordinates of Ninja Cat are I'm going to pick one specific point that represents his location. And I'm going to very carefully draw a vertical line down to the x-axis and also a horizontal line over to the y-axis. I need to approximate the cat's x position and the cat's y position. So let's start with his x position. It appears that the cat's x coordinate is halfway between these 2 points, halfway between 0, 0 and 320, 0. So halfway between 0 and 320 is 160. So the cat's x coordinate is approximately 160. The cat's y coordinate over on the y-axis doesn't exactly appear to be at the midpoint. I would say that the middle of 0, 0 and 0, 240 is this blue dot that I just drew here. So Ninja Cat's y coordinate appears to be a little bit less than that. I'm going to estimate, or I'm sorry, I'm not going to estimate. I'm going to find that exactly the midpoint here between 0 and 240 is 120. So now I'm going to estimate that if Ninja Cat is a little bit below that, I'm going to say that his y coordinate is about at 100. So we find that for number 9, the coordinates for Ninja Cat are approximately 160, 100. Okay, I'm going to ask that you finish up questions 10 and 11 on your own. The coordinates of the danger and the coordinates of the target. So remember, pick one point to represent the dog's location, pick one specific point to represent the ruby's location. Find the x coordinate, find the y coordinate to the best of your ability, and go ahead and fill in 10 and 11 at the bottom. And that's pretty much the end of this video. What you're going to see on page 4 in your packet is a chance for you to start brainstorming about your video game. What's going to be the location and who are going to be your characters. So at any point you can feel free to start brainstorming ideas, and we'll go from there. So that's the end of lesson 1.